I truly think that what they have done to Syria is a crime. It's a big crime against the civilizations in Syria. People do not really know the importance of Syria. That's why I criticize the Western governments, because their formula for these people in the region is just a recipe for more conflict. It's a recipe for more disintegration.
Today we talk about one of the most shocking geopolitical transformations in recent history: the fall of the Assad regime and the rise of a man who, up until recently, was one of the most wanted terrorists on this planet. And I'm having this conversation with Kevork Almassian, a Syrian-born geopolitical analyst and journalist. On December 7th, 2024, Bashar al-Assad's decades-long rule came crushing down. Not in a dramatic last stand, not in a grand battle, but in a quiet, almost anticlimactic collapse. Assad's regime, that had weathered over a decade of war, propped up by Russia and Iran, finally buckled. And in the void left behind, Ahmed Hussein al-Shar'a, better known as Abu Mohammed al-Julani, marched into Damascus virtually unchallenged. Al-Julani, the man who not so long ago stood at the helm of al-Qaeda in Syria, the man who had a $10 million bounty on his head, is now being rebranded as Syria's new strongman. Western leaders, as we will see, the same ones who not so long ago used his name as a proof of the war on terror, are suddenly finding him acceptable. Why? Because now he serves their interests. And this isn't speculation, it's happening right before our eyes. Take the World Economic Forum in Davos just a couple of days ago. Syria's new foreign minister, another figure with a history steeped in terrorism, was there shaking hands with no other than Tony Blair. Yes, Tony Blair, the same man who built his legacy on a supposed moral crusade against extremism and who is directly responsible for the illegal invasion of Iraq, a war of aggression built on deliberate deception that led to 1 million deaths and the destabilization of an entire region. Now there's Tony in Davos giving legitimacy to a government run by people who were not that long ago classified as terrorists by his own government. It's a masterclass on hypocrisy. The West's rebranding PR machine is working overtime. The same Ahmed Hussein, who not that long ago fought alongside ISIS and al-Qaeda, is now being paraded as a pragmatic leader. Good luck with that. American PR firms and think tanks are crafting narratives that erase his past. He's no longer a warlord, he's a stabilizing force. This transformation is so blatant, it's almost comical. And Turkey. They have played this game from the start. Ankara has spent years walking the tightrope between arming opposition forces and cutting deals with extremists whenever it suits them. Their fingerprints are all over this transition. Yet, with the rare exception of people like Kevork Almassian, no one is willing to call it out. But here is the real danger. This isn't just about one man or one region. It's about a pattern, the normalization of extremism whenever it aligns with geopolitical interests. What does it say about the international order when a man labeled a terrorist today becomes a legitimate leader tomorrow? No accountability, no consequences, just a new suit and a new haircut. This is the lesson we're supposed to take from Syria. That if you wait long enough, if you kill the right people, and if you play your cards right, the same governments that once hunted you will welcome you with open arms. This isn't just a tragedy for Syria, it's a warning for the entire region. History tells us what happens when extremists gain power with foreign backing. It's always the ordinary people that pay the price. And once again, the people of Syria are being forced to accept a future dictated by outside interests, one where the crimes of the past are erased, rewritten and repackaged just to suit the new world order. So let's be very clear. This isn't about stability or peace. It's just another chapter in a long, cynical game. And if you think just for a second that the consequences of all of this won't ripple far beyond Syria, think again. One last thing. Critical voices like the ones you hear on this channel are being actively silenced and suppressed. You may not notice it, you may not know it, you may not even believe it, but it does happen. And I have the statistics to prove it. And for those who are interested in deeper analysis, make sure to join me on Substack. No restricting algorithmic filters there, or listen to my podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or Amazon. All links are in the description below. Thank you.
Kevork Almassian, what a pleasure having you. How is it going?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much for having me. It's a really pleasure to be with you.
Likewise, likewise. I saw you on a couple of shows already, and I was wondering why I just came across your name myself so late, because you're quite active, I have to say. In a nutshell, I have a couple of, I did a little bit of research. You are a Syrian-born geopolitical analyst and journalist, and you live actually in Germany.
Yes, I do. I live in Germany since 2015.
How is life in Germany? How is it going there?
At the beginning,
it's more than a rhetorical question. Yeah, I mean, seriously.
I know. At the beginning, there is the cultural shock factor, and then you get used to it after some time, especially when you learn German and start communicating with the German people. You realize it's a difference of mentality, difference of value, and just a different set of values the people believe in here that you were not aware. So you think things are weird with the Germans at the beginning, but then you notice it's just a cultural difference and sometimes the language barrier. And like I integrated in the German society, I would say, well. And I became an active society member of the country. I think at the current moment, one of my two things that that bothers me a lot in Germany, the weather, basically, all the time it's gray and the lack of vitamin D, and the feeling that you are taxed unjustly in the country, and especially in different ways, and then you realize how big of a scam is the taxation system and how they play with the inflation, and they basically try to take as much as money from the income of the people. So I don't think that Germany's near future is going to be as bright as it used to be in the past, especially after the Ukraine and the Nord Stream pipelines. And there are different also social problems here. So I'm a little bit worried, let's say, also in Germany.
Germany we could spend a whole session on Germany, especially you mentioned already Nord Stream. I have a couple of guests here, also prominent diplomats and scientists who all say the same thing, also historians. Yeah? The fingerprints of the US is all over Nord Stream. But what people don't realize, it's the age of Germany's deindustrialization. I mean, it's that significant that people don't realize it. There's no discussion whatsoever. There's no investigation. Actually, everything is secret. Speaking about it gets you banned. All this kind of stuff. It's just crazy. But that was not the topic of our Germany. Is not our. Just out of interest, you said there's some strange things that you encountered in living in Germany. Give me one or two. What are the strangest? What was it that? The most strange things that you encountered for you?
Actually, one of the things that you encounter in Germany is the German people are not like in Syria. Like this, when you meet someone new in Syria, we show quick friendliness to the person, like as if we know this person for a long time. In Germany, it takes time. They really have to trust you in order to open the door for you, to invite you to their homes. And in our country, it's like if you see a stranger in the street, you invite him to your place at the same moment because you want to show generosity and hospitality, etc., etc. It's different here in Germany. So if you want to completely, let's say, live the Syrian way, then you have to go into the cantons, like some of the neighborhoods which is overwhelmingly just lived by, let's say, migrant background people. Then you could practice these things. But if you want to live among Germans, then you have to get used and adapt to their set of value. And this is something that got me into trouble, because I said, when you're in Rome, act like the Romans, and when you're in Germany, act like the Germans. I'm not saying that people should assimilate into the German society. I'm just trying to say, like, we're guests, right? Like, we have to respect the host in this case, and they have their set of values. But these things are not really welcomed. You can't say these things in Germany. You're going to be accused of being a nationalist or a far right. And I got into trouble for saying these things at the beginning. And then I learned my lesson, and I zipped my mouth when it comes to these controversial issues in Germany, because I don't want to get into further troubles, which could bring lots of problems in your life, and you would lose your income. You would they would push you into an economic jail, basically, because nobody will hire you, basically, and you will lose educational and academic opportunities. And I did lost a lot. Like, there is no newspaper or media outlet would like to hire me here in Germany. And I lost a scholarship also in 2016 in Germany. So these things happen because of an opinion that you express online, and they dislike it. And I learned my lesson, and I am trying to be more, let's say, I don't want to say persuasive, but I'm expressing similar opinions, but in different ways. And otherwise, if you're bold and you say things the way they are, then you will attract lots of criticism, especially by the mainstream and legacy media here, which for me, it seems like they are closely aligned with the state. And I'm talking about the permanent state. So there is this major headlines that if you cross, the state is not going to come after you and send you to jail, but they will definitely be journalists coming after you, smearing you. And then those quote unquote reputable media outlets, if they write negatively about you, it's a character assassination. You're done. Nobody in other companies would hire you if, let's say, a newspaper, a big name, an ARD or T-Online or something writes about you, because then it will be too controversial for someone like me to be cooperating or working in a company. That's why I started my own. I have no other way but to survive, because then I'm on my own. And I thank them, actually, like when I think about it, I had this victim mentality that, oh my God, they're attacking me. They're saying these things about me. And I'm so a victim of this. Like what they say, I know that it's a lie, because I know myself, I'm not that person that they're trying to portray me. But it hurt me at the beginning. And then I realized, like, okay, this should be a motivation for me to establish my own thing. And when I started it, they tried to crush it. They called it a propaganda YouTube channel and different things, like I'm a far right person. And I come from a traditional left-wing family in Syria. We have never been right-wing, never been a nationalist, or never been radical. But they say things, and you have two choices. You either submit to their allegations and you bury yourself, basically, mentally, because that's the purpose of these attacks, or this should motivate you to start your independent work. And I did that, and I think after 7-8 years of working with almost no income, I worked for 5 to 6 years with almost no income from my YouTube podcast, zero. It was around like between $0 to $400 per month. But then it accelerates, and you gain credibility among the people, because it takes lots of consistency and knowledge to share with the people. And the people know. The people know because they feel the truth behind the words you're telling them. And they have the opportunity to turn on their TV and watch the let's say public TV talking something about me or about the conflict in somewhere else, and then they turn on the YouTube and see how genuine you are, genuinely trying to explain to the people for their own sake, because my motivation is the people. My motivation is not money. If it was money, I would go to mainstream press and I change my opinions.
You already preempted one of my questions, because your narrative is definitely not the mainstream one, which of course is challenging. I mean, I experienced it myself here on this channel. We are shadow banned. I have plenty of comments where subscribers said, I have now been unsubscribed without my knowledge multiple times. I mean, there are all this, and it's not only YouTube, it's on Twitter, now it starts interesting. After the debanning, it also starts on Twitter.
Yes.
So I have a strong suspicion, because it's the first time after the debanning that I get this message, your post will be reviewed, before it's getting published, these kind of things. So this kind of censorship gets more and more all pervasive, which makes voices like yours harder to access.
Actually, many of the narratives and arguments I come across online, I'm like, wow, this is so not so clever. I think this is dumb, but I don't want them to be banned. And I think so many people express their opinions, some of which are, I find it radical, but I don't want them to be banned or shadow banned. I want everyone to express opinion in a free, on a free platform. But nowadays, narratives shift public opinion, and public opinion matters for the politicians.
Information war. Yes.
Information war. And nowadays we are not free. Like you mentioned, suppression on social media platforms. And I can give countless of examples of YouTube channels with very, I would say, less subscriber base and having 10 times more viewership. My own YouTube channel, when I started it and I had 10,000 subscribers, I used to have more views. Now I'm almost reaching 100,000 and the views are getting less and less and less. What does that tell you about the YouTube algorithm and the suppression? I think this started in 2019. Trump, when came to power, the so-called, back then it was the Syrian opposition, they wanted to sanction journalists and activists and impose sanctions, like American sanctions against them, not only the Assad government officials, but also journalists and activists who countered the mainstream narrative about Syria. So they sent to the Trump administration list of names asking him to sanction these people, basically, and under the title enabling the Assad regime. And since then, my YouTube channel started to be suppressed. And I think it's not with the information we have about the constant communication between social media platforms and the intelligence community and the administration in the US, then I would assume that this administration, probably under Trump, they found it really ridiculous to sanction basically activists on YouTube and on X, but they could send list of names to YouTube and ask them to suppress the content, because the channel itself came under direct attack by the German press. And the German press went to a German university asking an expert on Syrian affairs about the content of my work, and he said, "Yeah, it's quite clear. It's a propaganda work for the Assad regime, Okay, so explain why this is a propaganda, what I'm doing. And excuse me, but I've been involved in the Syrian war from 2011. And when I came across this German expert, I never heard of him, and he hasn't published any book on Syria or academic work on Syria, but he's considered an expert on Syrian affairs on a public German television and calling my work a propaganda. Okay, let's have a debate together in a civilized environment and let's talk. But they reject talking. That's the problem. And this is my problem since I moved in Germany, that the first thing I did when I moved in Germany, I tried to open channels back then, the naive in me, of course, with the Linke Party, the left wing, because they told me, I'm new in Germany, I don't know anything about anything, and they told me this is the anti-imperialist party. And I opened channels with them in 2016, a few months after I arrived in Germany, and they invited me to a conference. This was in Baden-Württemberg, to hold a presentation, give a presentation about Syria. And the event was 2 weeks later, but 2 days later, after they fixed the schedule, they called me back and they said they have to cancel the event because my opinions on Palestine and Israel would embarrass them. And they started asking me, what do you think about Israel? Does Israel has the right to exist? And I told them I'm for international law. I want for the Jewish people and for the Arabs, for the Christians, for everyone to live side by side. But am I for a two-state solution? That's a different case. I truly don't see that the two-state solution is viable. But I see a one-state solution for people who wants to be treated equally in front of a rule of law, basically. That's the way out of this conflict. But they find that extreme, so they canceled it. But then I was invited by the right-wing group, AFD, and I gave a presentation about the Syrian case. And this was like hell has opened on me. Like I was new in Germany, I'm someone, it's not like I've been engaged in politics here and I know everything that AFD said in the past or every politician, what position they have on certain things. But when I had the opportunity to express my opinion about the Syrian case, I did. And they allowed me to say whatever I want in a free way. Nobody said you can't mention this, you can't say that, and this is like, it's a taboo in our party. No, they let me speak. But then I go to a Green Party conference about Syria in the Bundestag, and I felt like I'm in a very hostile environment. They recognized me, the people of the Green Party. And while I'm sitting there with my friend and listening, not even speaking, listening, they had 4 experts. 4 of them are saying the same thing, basically. Like, why do you invite 4 people if everyone wants to say the same thing about Syria? What about the other side or someone in the middle? So we were there with a friend and it turned against us, and the entire event became about this person is sitting here, he was on the AFD conference and he's radical and he's here and he wants to sabotage our event. And they started smearing me, like there were people coming and telling things to me like about my mother, about sister and all these things while I'm in the conference room in the AFD. In the Green Party. And I didn't speak, my friend spoke, and they cut his microphone. They didn't want him to continue his thought, and they kicked us out of the conference room. So, excuse me, people who want to come and say, why did you give a speech for AFD? What about the other parties that they don't want to listen at all about what's happening in Syria, including allegedly anti-imperialist party, which their position has to be against the imperialist intervention in Syria. But they are too afraid and to be critical of such sensitive cases, because back then the issue was refugees are welcomed and nothing else. Like we don't have to go one step further and say, okay, who is a refugee? If somebody is carrying arms in Syria and he arrived in Germany, does this person deserve to be take a refuge here in Germany? No, under the law, it's not. But there are people.
Maybe for the benefit of the few, Germany accepted about 1 million Syrian refugees back then. And the AfD is what's considered a right-wing party in Germany. Yeah. So Germany is quite, it was an initiative under Angela Merkel to accept 1 million Syrian refugees, which had quite stirred debate, to say it politely, within Germany. The critics, of course, often overlook the fact that Germany needs, if Germany wants to survive politically, economically, Germany needs people, right? The older getting more older, the older population is growing. All these kind of demographic things that you easily overlook. But again, it has been definitely politicized, and I believe there was no other country on the globe who accepted that many refugees from anywhere.
Yes.
Right.
And this is a motivation to create refugee crisis. This is the problem that I'm trying to tell my Western friends and colleagues, that these elites, if they need newcomers for the economy, right? And what about our countries? Like now Germany has 8,000 Syrian doctors. 8,000 Syrian doctors in the hospitals.
Yes, and now they're afraid they're going back to Syria.
Yes. I mean, this is the thing now with this regime change in Syria. We've been told that the refugees they want to go back, but the Assad regime is waiting them on the borders to send them to the dungeons, so we cannot send them back. Now, the Greens are basically, and the SPDs are basically saying, no. Even with the regime change, we shouldn't send them back to Syria. They're permanently here. But this wasn't the argument to begin with. And the person who receives a refugee status basically came from a war zone, and he received a refuge. And once the conditions are gone, he loses the refugee status under the law. I'm not saying this is what they should do. I'm just saying what is the law. But now no, we can't send them back to Syria because they need them here. They need them in two ways. I mean, the well-educated Syrians, let's say, they will definitely find good jobs here. They will definitely be in hospitals, in the car industry, electricians, engineers, etc., etc. But you have also Syrians who would work in jobs like the Germans aren't working any longer, right? The taxi drivers, the security, restaurants, etc. So you have also created an economic system in Syria, or the conditions for the Germans not to be willing to work some of the jobs. So you need now newcomers to your country to give them these minimum wage jobs. So I argued against this, and I said, look, Syria needs the Syrians more than ever now, right? It's time for reconstruction. And funny enough, that because of these media campaigns against me, and also legal campaigns, basically, they revoked my asylum in Germany because they said, this guy is a dangerous person, he has a big mouth, and probably this evil Assad sent him to Germany, so we have to come after him. So I took them to court, basically, to defend my asylum. And I mean, my lawyer, who was a very good lawyer, when we left the court, he said, there is no way for them to reject your appeal now. Like, legally, it's not possible. But they found ways out. Right? The way they create this legal case against you is basically then they revoked my asylum. And they even said the judge basically, I've never seen a case about a refugee case, an asylum case with 5 judges. It's like, who am I? Am I a criminal here? 5 judges? And the questions were so absurd. Am I a spy for Assad? And like they asked me, why did I attend a conference in Damascus in 2011 where they were regime officials. I mean, they were also opposition figures, but they don't mention these things. Anyways, they revoked my asylum, and they even said, there is an Abschiebungsverbot, or there was, for the Syrian refugees. It's a ban on deporting Syrians, but they made an exception for me. They said, your case is different because you have close ties to the Assad regime. And their reasoning for it is because I studied in a private university in Syria, they say, and the owner of the university is the son of the secretary of Assad. And first of all, the man has died long time ago. He's no longer the secretary of Assad. Secondly, it's a shareholder university, and this person, who is the son of the former secretary of Assad, has 30% of the shares of the university. And we have many doctors graduated from this university working now in German hospitals. Are they all having close ties to the Assad regime, or this only applies to me?
It applies to you because you speak out, of course. Yeah.
Yes, so it applies to me, and they revoked my asylum, and they said you go back to Syria, basically, and where? To Aleppo.
What would happen to you if you would, under the current circumstances, have to go back to Syria? What would really happen? As far as you can tell.
This was in 2012.
No, but now, if you would have to go to,
Now, like if they sent me back to Syria, I would have been dead now, 100%. There is no doubt about it. They asked me to go back to Syria, to Aleppo. I didn't have any apartment or anything we lost everything in the war, right? They said, we don't care, like you should go back. And now that the regime change happened, I was on every major anti-Assad media outlet because of this German campaign against me. They translated everything to Arabic. On Al Jazeera and different Qatari-funded outlets, everybody was saying that this guy is dangerous, you have to be careful, and he's a propagandist. So there is a militant group in Syria called Islam's Army. They used to occupy the suburbs of Damascus for 4 years. And they issued a statement, and they named me in the statement, saying that I'm a spy for Assad in Germany. So imagine if I was in Syria during the regime change, what would have happened to me? They would have recorded my decapitation and put it on video. And this is, I think, what these people who did this campaign against me wanted. They wanted me to go to Syria and get killed there, because even under Assad, they were trying to put bombs under the cars of people who used to work as journalists or public figures, and they ran against these Islamist groups in Syria, or they campaigned against them. So in any ways, I managed to stay in Germany, and I'm thankful also for my wife. Things work in a funny way, you know. I truly believe that there is when a window is closed, the door opens to you. And while before I even stood in front of the court, I met my wife here, and in a matter of 1 year, we got married in Europe, basically. And they were compelled to give me a resident permit based on my marriage. But this was not planned from my side. I totally lost hope. I even lost hope in marriage, because I'm sure you know also it's very difficult in Germany to find probably a woman who wants to be a woman, basically.
I was wondering how you're gonna phrase this now. Yeah,
like it's difficult to find someone who wants a monogamous relationship, to be a wife, committed, and to be basically a housewife. And on the first date, my wife told me, "Look, I'm a woman. You're a man." So a message received for me, because I was also looking for a family wife, you know, somebody who can raise my family, take care of the kids, because I can't send my kids to kindergarten, where they're teaching them about all sorts of stuff about sexuality when they are like very, very young age, you know. And I have friends and colleagues and who have kids and they are in the kita. I find it a little bit absurd for a 4-year-old, 5-year-old to learn about the rainbow flag and become a vegan when they are very, very, very young. Like, people has to have their option when they grow up to choose their lifestyle, but not to be
indoctrinated.
Indoctrinated, yes, they're indoctrinated.
Yeah. Okay, Kevork, shall we go in direction Syria? Now, I had also for my own benefit, whilst researching for this interview, and I found, to my surprise, I mean, I know there were many interests involved in this so-called revolution in 2011, but I didn't know how many. So I have a list here. So of course we had Russia. Russia had an army base there, provided military support to Assad's government, including airstrikes and ground operations since 2015. Iran, of course, deployed troops and invested billions to assist Assad. So again, to lose Syria is for Iran definitely a blow. United States, we know that, led a coalition conducting air and ground operations against ISIS and supporting rebel factions like the Syrian Free Army. And we can talk about the so-called Syrian Free Army. Yeah? Turkey, big player, also today, big player, occupied parts of northern Syria, fighting against the Free Syrian Army, Assad's government, and ISIS, while supporting the Syrian National Army. Then, of course, we had Hezbollah, Lebanese militant group. You know that Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Britain, France, and the Netherlands, where I am, provided political, logistic, and military support to Syrian rebel groups. Rebel groups. I like this ambiguous. Nobody knows nobody's supposed to know what or who they really are.
Yes.
Iraq supported the Syrian government primarily against ISIS. And I find it so interesting that the guy who actually was running ISIS is now running the whole country. Yeah? Israel, of course, conducted airstrikes against Hezbollah and Iranian elements in Syria. Egypt, initially supported or supportive of the Assad regime, fought against ISIS, but reportedly deployed troops to Idlib. We can talk about this too. And then there was this, Lebanon to some extent experienced spillover fighting between 2011 and 2017. So this is a whole list of countries that were actively engaged and affected by the so-called revolution that started in 2011. Now, without kind of spending the rest of our whole interview on that specific topic, but if you can encapsulate what, in your view, really happened in that so-called revolution run by the Syrian Free Army, because here in the West, it looks like, that was, the West was innocent here. We didn't do anything, right?
So all these powers that you mentioned, we are supposed to believe that every of these different regional and international powers intervened in Syria for the sake of the Syrian people. Like, they want to export democracy, human rights, and they want to teach us how to be civilized. And this is something that is laughable for me, because many people on the anti-Assad camp believe in that there is a genuine care for the Syrian people. I'm not naive to believe that the same powers which destroyed Iraq and Libya, and they have waged endless wars with millions of people perished around the world. And we're talking about the permanent states in the US and the military-industrial complex and the oligarchs, billionaires basically. They have invested interests in these conflicts. First is
let's not forget there's oil in Syria.
Yes. So you have a statico and you have a regime that is standing in the way for the privatization of Syria, the liberalization of the Syrian society in a way that can fit the Western value-based or rules-based international order. It is against Israel and has been campaigning against the U.S. position in the region, aligning itself with the enemies of the U.S. I mean, everything that the U.S. doesn't like, the Syrian former government did. So you want to destroy the statico, and you don't want to intervene directly. It has become too controversial for the U.S. to intervene, like the ones they did in Iraq and Libya. So you wage a different type of warfare, which is arming and supporting militant groups in Syria, calling them freedom fighters, and unleash...
Sorry, which the US has a long history of doing, right?
Yes. I mean, in Latin America, they used to support these death squads in different parts of Latin America. And those were also death squads, but they were framed as moderate rebels, as freedom fighters, etc., against the tyrant Assad. But on the ground, we have seen heinous crimes committed by these groups, and sectarian motivated, ethnic motivated, religiously motivated, and types of warfare that it doesn't match with the narrative that they're fighting for democracy, right? At least the freedom fighters should present a different image about themselves and better image than the Assad government. But if the alternative is worse than Assad, then the solutions are worse than the problems that we have in the country. And this was the base why many people supported Assad to begin with, because they've seen what's the alternative. And in this case, each of these powers had different interests in Syria. I think the major interest in Syria has been for the US to kick out the Russian Navy from fleet from the Mediterranean. And this was the same case with Crimea when the coup happened in 2014. The next government wanted to kick the Russian fleet out from the Black Sea, so the Russians came and occupied Crimea and held a referendum there to capture it. And the Russians want to have this access between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, so both of these fleets are important for them, because during the Cold War era, the Americans were superior over the Soviet Union in many aspects, one of which was the sea power of the US was very, very mighty compared to the Soviet Union. And the Russians wanted to learn from these lessons and keep their fleet in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. The second reason is Israel, of course. Syria allowed multiple militant groups in the region to fight against Israel, and has funneled weapons, for example, to Hezbollah, and Hezbollah delivered it to the Palestinians. And this has been a red line for the US, that they are non-state actors posing threat against Israeli occupation forces. So they had to get rid of Asad, who is in the same, what was called the axis of resistance with Iran. Also gas. The gas is very, very important component of this war. Qatar offered Syria in 2008 to extend pipelines to Turkey through Syria, and Turkey would distribute it to Europe. And Assad said no, although he was very close with Qatar and Turkey, because he knows that once he allows the Qatari pipelines to go to Turkey, this will be the end of the Nord Stream pipelines of Russia, and Russia was a strategic partner with Assad. So he refused this project for the sake of his strategic ally. But in any ways, the Nord Stream pipelines were or attempted to be destroyed then in 2022 by the Biden administration. So if you link these two conflicts, you see there are so many similarities between them. They wanted to end the Nord Stream pipelines by extending the Qatari pipelines, but then when they couldn't do it, they destroyed the Nord Stream pipelines. But now there is a renewed talk about Qatar would like to proceed with this project to Turkey, and Turkey will likely come and occupy the coastal line of Syria in order to extract the gas from the Mediterranean. So Syria is gone. Like, Syria no longer has a sovereignty, doesn't have an independent economy any longer. And the foreign minister of the HDS-led Syria says that they will dismantle the previous economic model in Syria, and they will privatize the public sector, the ports, the airports, and they will bring foreign investors to the country. Now, on the surface, some people may say, yeah, but this is how Syria will be reconstructed. And I understand this point of view, but I would like to add and say that since Syria is not independent and HTS relies on foreign support to continue ruling Syria, then HTS will give these foreign corporations the monopoly over the investments in the country. And once the investors have a grip over the economy, they then control the domestic and foreign policies of the country, because the politicians now want to appease the investors, and the investors will not funnel money into the pockets of the politicians if they run against the interests of this corporation, something that we see daily in Europe and in the United States. Like, you see, it is mind-blowing, let's say, the least to say, to see politicians in the West taking decisions that run so blatantly against the interests of their own people, because they are committed with the investors. They're committed with the corporations, and they're serving the corporation, like a pharmaceutical industries during the pandemic, right? During the Corona era. So this is going to be the case with Syria, and Syria will be a hostage of this reconstruction process, basically. And since since Davos, basically, WEF invited the HTS foreign minister
it's
to
incredible.
the world,
it's incredible.
He sat with Tony Blair. You remember when Davos basically told the people you will own nothing and you will be happy?
Exactly.
I think they are telling the Syrian people now you will not own your country and you will be happy.
There is, if I may, there is a slight contradiction in my point of view here, right? HTS is an organization, and again, I make it very black and white. Yeah? For me, it's an organization coming from the Middle Ages. They're still kind of in the Middle Ages, and then you superimpose a modern capitalism on top of it. Now, what will probably happen is that money will rule for a time because they all will get rich, right? So the American corporations and the people in Syria who kind of channel all this money, they will get rich. But underlaying, that will not solve fundamental political, but also geopolitical issues. So sooner or later, there will come a friction or a cut in that even though lucrative endeavor. And we have seen this in other places. So how long can that play? I mean, Syria at the moment, it seems, is chopped in little pieces. The smaller the better, and the more the better because you can manage them better. So Turkey takes a part, Israel takes a part, the Americans are already there, and Trump said it. I heard him say it many times. He said they said I left Syria. I didn't. I kept the oil. I have the oil. We got the oil. This it's clear why America is there. So there are multiple interests. So, and of course you already mentioned Israel. So the whole there's now a freeway from Israel to Iran. Yeah, and that's I think is the main thing here for Israel.
Actually, the people of Jolani, they are very good in destruction. Like this type of regressive groups, militant, very regressive and violent groups, Takfiri groups, right? If you have a statico, you want to destroy it, perfect. I have examples of Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, even in Chechnya. You can use these groups for geopolitical purposes. But when they reach
train
power,
them, you arm them.
Yes.
Yeah.
The CIA, for your respected audience, spent $1 billion per year on these Takfiri groups in Syria between 2011 to 2018, until Trump ended it, right? Qatar spent tens of billions. The Netherlands, since you mentioned in this conversation, Mark Rutte sent $90 million euros to a militant group in Syria called Jabhat Shamia, which is labeled in the Netherlands as a terrorist group. And he said, no, we didn't send a little aid. But what is a non-lethal aid? You're sending them Toyota trucks, basically, to be used in military purposes. You're setting them satellite communication. You're giving them laptops. You're giving them cameras. You're enabling their operations against the Syrian army. So they use these groups. Now that HTS is in power, as I mentioned, they cannot build a state. And the backers of HTS know this. So that is why they said we need 4 years to hold elections. Because in these 4 years, they want to strike the strategic deals with the de facto leadership of Syria, one of which is the gas fields in the Mediterranean for Turkey, Qatar gas pipelines, pacifying Syria completely from the Israeli conflict and allowing Israel to establish a corridor and another buffer zone basically in Syria, and to allow for the US to revive the federalism system in Syria. They want to impose a federal system for Syria. Now, this would be the least worst option if they manage to establish a federal system in Syria, but that's not going to work. So the federal system in Syria is a pre-phase for the balkanization of Syria. A federal system under the current HTS rule, which is engaged in violent, brutal sectarian violence, is pushing every ethnic and religious group to their cantons. So now that if they are Alawites in Damascus, they no longer want to live in Damascus, they want to go back to their group, which is in Latakia, Tartus, and in other places. They're ethnically cleansing the Alawites from Homs and Hama, so the people are running again to Latakia and Tartus. So they want to create regions which is one-colored, right? And this is when there is enough sectarian violence and existential threat against the people will start thinking narrow, because now your survival depends on the survival of your sect or religion. So you stick with your community and start identifying yourself based on your sub-identities. So you're no longer a Syrian, you're an Alawite, you're a Shia, you are a Christian. So you see
exactly what they want.
Yes,
fracturing.
exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, you see now in Syria demonstrations. This is mind-boggling for me. You see the Alawites demonstrating against HTS. The Druze are demonstrating against HTS. In the past 50 years, I haven't seen any group protesting as a group. They were all Syrians, because the Alawites are not like they all have one opinion. You have the communists, you have the socialists, you have the capitalists, you have left, right, middle, center. Everybody has a different opinion. But now people identify themselves because of the threat, existential threat, as in their sub-identities. So this is the recipe for balkanization of Syria. And what is going to happen next? Two scenarios, in my opinion. The Saudis will try to change this scenario in Syria. And I have information that I could share with you. The Saudis and the Emiratis have sent intelligence assets to Syria under the guise of humanitarian work, journalism, etc. Because they don't like the outcome of this war. They don't want Turkey to expand in Syria, and Qatar has its own way. They're rivals in the region. So the Saudis will present, in my opinion, a different formula, and that is to send back one of the former close friends of Asad. He was in the military, called Manaf Atlas. And Manaf Atlas is the son of the former defense minister of Syria under Hafez al-Assad. So when Hafez al-Assad did a coup, his close friend who did it with him was Mustafa Atlas. And Mustafa Atlas is from a famous Syrian Sunni family from Al-Rastan. And he became like the defense minister for 30 years of Syria. And his son was also a commander, a colonel in the Syrian army, was close friends with Assad. He deserted from the Assad government in 2012, and the French and Saudi intelligence took him out of Syria and evacuated him to Saudi Arabia. So it seems that he has been groomed now for almost a decade in Saudi Arabia and waiting for this exact moment. So the Saudis will present him as a part of a project called the Free Syrian Officers coming back to Syria, just like what happened in Egypt in the 1950s. And this is going to lead the country, and those military leadership is going to stabilize the country, because when there is instability, people will prioritize stability over everything else. I think this is what the Saudis are looking for, to establish a Sisi style, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi style of a government in Syria, to cut this project of the Turkey and Qatar and the Israelis in Syria. Are they going to be successful or not? I'm not sure, because the alternative for this project is definitely the balkanization of Syria and divisions. We will see the Kurds in the east, and then the Druze in As-Suwaida in the southern part of Syria. And then you have the Alawites in the coastal part. And the Christians are already, 90% of them have left the country in the past 14 years. So their numbers are very, very low. And the Armenians are the same thing. So in these circumstances, I think Syria doesn't have any good option in front of it. That's why I say, for me at least, it's time for me to just observe what's happening, because the next 10 years is going to form the new Syria. And this new Syria, it's either going to be a Saudi-sponsored federal system, let's say, with 70% of the country in the hands of these three officers, or complete disintegration of Syria, and each of these powers take over different regions of the country.
At the moment, it looks, Israel is a key player here. So I hear now they even want to go to Damascus, these kind of things. Yeah. So the Israeli soldiers we see in Gaza, they have the Greater Israel already stuck on their uniforms. Jordan, Lebanon, sowieso Syria. So it's very difficult at this moment to predict in which direction this is going. But again, at the moment, Israel is the entity that's expanding.
Yes.
And we just saw in Syria, they have now a buffer zone beyond the buffer zone. They already planted the flags there. They have now the water resources that they always wanted. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a tricky one. Now, there are two things I would like to dive into a little bit. Yeah. So who was really responsible for Assad's fall? And secondly, I really would like to look at who is al-Julani and his cohorts. But let's start with who is really responsible for Assad's fall. And before I give the microphone to you, I heard a former Syrian general complaining that they got instructions, he personally and his platoon, I believe it's called, got instructions to abandon a battle-ready platoon full with armaments, tanks, whatever, to abandon them. And then he said, at the beginning, they were not sure if it really came from the military command and Assad. But in retrospect, they found out it really did. And then I heard somebody say, Assad was not ousted, he got fired. I mean, there is a difference here. The general said they suspect that Assad then provided critical information to Israel, which is why they knew exactly what to bomb in the first 8 days. And I have a number here. I had yesterday an interview with somebody else about this topic. Between 70 and 80% of Syrian military strategic hardware has been destroyed in just 8 days with about 600 air raids. So it seems that, again, Assad was not really ousted.
I think Assad, when the Aleppo offensive happened, he was shocked. He thought that Russia has kept Turkey in its place, so this attack would never happen. He was very confident that he emerged victorious from this war, and this was
at the beginning. Yeah.
I'm talking about only a few weeks before he fell. He was highly confident that he won this war, and he was so delusioned to believe that Turkey will not unleash this HTS attack on Aleppo. Although I'm not going to personalize this, but I reported about this attack 6 weeks before it happened. And I said, it's going to happen against Aleppo, and the al-Julani is going to present himself as the leader of a contract army for the United States, and this is the project. And when I ask in Damascus, they say, no, don't worry, we have lots of army in Aleppo, this and that. But they were caught off guard, and they were in panic mode, and many of the Syrian military had to redeploy from Aleppo to northern Hama because they didn't want to fight inside the city and destroy the city once again. But the decisions to withdraw, logically, Syrian army had 300,000 soldiers, right? So where are they now? What happened to the soldiers? What happened to all the military units? The 4th Division, led by Maher al-Assad, the 25th unit belonging to the Tiger Forces. They could fight for months without any reinforcement from outside. But decisions were made to withdraw. Who gave the decision to withdraw? This is a serious issue because I think that when Assad went to Moscow, before Aleppo fell, he was 2 days before Aleppo fell, he was in Moscow, and he didn't receive support from Moscow. And he came and the second day met with the foreign minister of Iran and then the national security advisor for Khamenei, Ali Larijani, in secret meeting. No one gave him support. And he took a decision to leave, but he didn't tell anyone. He didn't tell anyone that he's going to leave. And the decisions were made to withdraw. I think the Syrian army was demoralized, basically, after 7 years of war, more than 7 years, basically. So what happened is basically, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the soldier. You are a soldier or an officer. You fought for 10 years for Assad and for the country. And then the outcome of the war was you're poor, your family is poor, you cannot feed them. And if you're permanently disabled, you're neglected, and there's all the conditions are against Assad, because he should have taken care of the military, fed them well, and dedicated good salaries for the soldiers, because this is not a 1 year of service. You're talking about 10 years of fight. So what happened to the future of this person who fought? And why would he fight again if this was the outcome of the war, when he's poor and he's eating a potato and the bread, right? So he doesn't want to fight for Assad any longer. This was his fault in this case. And at the same time, he created these conditions, because the military is poor now, that there are checkpoints everywhere. And if you want to pass through the checkpoint, you have to pay a bribery, because this soldier also wants to survive. So you give him a cigarette package, or you give him 5,000 lira. But if there is a soldier accepting to get 5,000 lira to eat something, then there are his superiors who would get $50,000 and sell the entire region. Because now you created the conditions that the military cannot survive until there is bribery, right? So unless there is bribery. So he shares lots of responsibility for what happened in the country. We know all these interventions and the tens of billions of dollars and the demonization of Assad. We have explained all these things, and this was so unfair against him and against the Syrian people, right, in Syria. But he also mismanaged the affairs of Syria. He surrounded himself, but not with the smartest people. And they were all repeating the same they have created like an echo chamber for themselves and repeating the same things to each other, completely detached from what is happening in the country. Like if your advisors are telling you, Mister, you're the best and you took the best decisions and you won this war militarily, why would you compromise politically? Then they are giving you the wrong advice. Because rest assured that Turkey is it's a very strong power in the region, and Turkey has played an instrumental role in Syria. If I want to put a list of countries who inflicted the most pain on the Syrian people, I would say Turkey comes the first, because they opened the borders, allowed the tens of thousands of Takfiris to come to Syria, establish Nusra, ISIS, and create this mayhem. Yes, Americans directed this war, but the intelligence role of Turkey was massive. And you see HTS now, they have the intelligence construct of Turkey. So in this case, he was like, no, I don't want to meet with Erdogan. I understand his point, but if your allies in Moscow and Tehran are telling you, you need to go and meet with Erdogan, we need him. And if you're dependent on Iran and Russia for survival, then you have to be more flexible with Turkey in this case. And he rejected to do it into extent that Iran stopped sending fuel to Syria for 3 months to force Assad to go and meet with Erdogan. If the pressure is this high against you by your allies, I think he should have been more flexible and deal with Erdogan in this case, just like he did with Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And the rest of the Arabic countries.
So you partially answered the question, which was who was really responsible for Assad's fall. So Turkey is a major player here, I understand, right?
Definitely. Turkey, the US, Qatar, Israel, the US, European countries were like just jumping the wagon, they're sending aid, but their role is not to the same level of the US. The US has trained militants, has sent weapons through different third countries, and they have funneled in Syria. We're talking about $1 billion per year. But Qatari money was the Qatari former foreign minister Hamad bin Jassim, who has overseen this regime change, which started in 2011. He says they spent tens of billions of dollars in Syria. Saudi Arabia, at one point, he says, under Bandar bin Sultan, wanted to allocate $2 trillion in Syria. He said we couldn't manage to collect all this money, but we have collected considerable amount of money. You're talking about $2 trillion of a budget that Saudi Arabia wanted to allocate to remove Assad from power. So the interests and the stakes were very high, and they wanted to achieve this. And I always said, don't be delusioned and think that we won this war for the Syrians. They will come back when things are rotten to the core in Syria, because those sanctions were aimed to destroy the Syrian economy and push the people to devastation and poverty, to the extent that why would I care if it's Julani or if it's Assad? I need bread. The people have reached to the point 90% of them are below poverty line, that my only concern is that I would go to my bed at least ate something before I sleep, or my child ate something before he slept. So if you put the Syrian people now in front of such conditions, then they will choose food and basic necessities. And Assad couldn't manage these issues. He was like, you go to Damascus and you see all these fancy cars, and people were like, the rich people are not serving in the military, and then the military is humiliated on the roads. If somebody wants to travel from one place to another, has to auto stop in the highways. That's not the proper way to manage the conflict, the crisis from within. All these rich people became so blatantly rich to, I would say, in a very provocative way, like you go to a bar and your bill is basically $100 to go to a bar because the entrance is $50. And then if you drink 2-3 cups of something there, it's $100. $100 could feed a family in Syria for 1 month. And then the rich have become so much rich, and the corrupted people have created parallel economies in the country, and they benefited from the crisis. So we have to be also critical to Assad, and especially the way he escaped. It's unjustifiable. And if 500,000 Syrians died for a war, that major part of it was about your survival, basically, and your rule, it will not make any difference if it's 500,001. He's not better than the rest of the Syrian people. And most of the military, the soldiers, they sacrifice their souls basically for the country and for you. Leaving them behind like this and going to Moscow, it's a big insult for his legacy, for the legacy of his father. And he left the country basically to the wolves, right? And in this case, you see what is happening in the country, as we discussed.
Before we come to HTS, very briefly, I saw some unverified reports. I have no way of unverifying that Assad was poisoned in Moscow.
No. There are so many rumors. They also said that when Assad went to Moscow and he was held hostage there, and they didn't let him go back to Syria, and this is believed by many, many pro-Assad people. And I would like to assure them with 100% certainty that Assad returned. Assad met with the foreign minister of Iran the second day, and then met with Ali Larijani, and he met with people that I knew. And they all told me the same thing, that Assad didn't tell them that he's going to leave, and they were in the office till the last moment, and they thought that tomorrow there is a meeting, and he was going to record the video statement for the Syrian people about what's happening in the country. And then at night, he was accompanied by the Russian military attaché in Damascus. They secured his road to Latakia, and from Latakia he escaped to Moscow. I don't think he was poisoned in Moscow. I think that we will see photos of him sooner or later. We will see.
No, he's not dead. I'm not saying that he's dead. Yeah, but there was some incident.
I don't know. If something like this happens, we have enough sources to know about these things. And I think he's just living his life now in Moscow. He was not poisoned. And there are some things that I can't even say now online unless, because I'm in Germany, as you may know, then they will say, he has the close ties to the Assad regime. I mean, I'm a journalist. I had my contacts. That's how we got you information about Assad. I knew that Assad will escape the country at noontime in Damascus. He escaped the country at night. And I knew he was going to escape during the noontime.
If we come to al-Julani and his cohort, but a couple of things that struck me. So first of all, and again, this is a statement from this former general. Yeah? He compared that Julani groups, they were well trained, well equipped. They had real army uniforms, as opposed to the Syrian army. What you said already, they had to go. His words, his guys had sneakers on. Yeah,
Yeah.
compared to those revolutionaries who were very well equipped. Then apparently there was the order to stand down. Now, after they took over, what struck me is, first of all, there was not a single critical word about Israel, not a single critical word about the US. I mean, not
Yes.
so long ago. I mean, this guy, Jolani, had a $10 million bounty on his head at the very time when all of this happened. Actually, the bounty was still standing when he already met international politicians. It was only
Yes.
reversed, or how do you say it? A bounty. How can a bounty be negated or whatever? Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Removed.
only relieved after I think 10 days or so. Yeah, and then of course we have the interesting curiosity that this rebranding of the person of al-Julani with a new name, a new haircut, new dress, was a PR. It was an American PR company that designed this whole strategy.
Yes. It was also more of the Democrat Party type of rebranding. Like once you see that they're trying to portray him as a diversity friendly person, like who cares if he's a diversity friendly or not? This is something more like a European American thing. And nobody in the Middle East speaks about the diversity friendly. Those terminologies come exclusively from the West. Jolani went to Iraq. He says that he watched the second Intifada of in Palestine, and he was motivated by the suffering of the Palestinians, and then he decided to not to help his Palestinian brothers and sisters, but he went to Iraq to commit sectarian violence. And if we know anything about the Iraq war, when the US and the UK occupied it, they faced serious resistance by popular resistance movements. So in order to divide this resistance between and create vertical lines like they do usually divide and conquer, the Saudi intelligence and the American intelligence cooperated in Iraq to support these radical elements and create the conditions for al-Qaeda elements to thrive in the country. And one of these people was Abu Mohammed al-Julani. And he used to send car bombs to Shia neighborhoods in order to start a civil war. And this is why I think he has been an asset for the US for a long time. This is not something new. That to cause a civil war in Iraq served the American interests, where they wanted to create this rift between the opposition and terrorism, basically, in order to call every violent act against the American forces as terrorist. Yes, everybody is terrorist now. And they were successful in this. And then he ended up in the Buqa camp with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, basically. And both of them leave the Buqa or the Bucha CIA-led military camp, basically, or the prison camp. And one forms al-Nusra Front and the other one forms ISIS in Syria. Just in 2011. They leave in 2011 and they join the war in Syria. So the sequence of events just indicate that they were and still are assets for the US strategy in the region. And this has been confirmed by the former special envoy of the US to Syria, James Jeffrey, who said on PBS News, basically, that Jolani army has been an asset for the US strategy in Syria. Now, the bounty terrorist or not a terrorist, those are for media purposes. Like, you can portray him as a terrorist, but you're delivering him weapons. You're giving him training. Who's training Jolani's army? Isn't Turkey a NATO country? Isn't the Incirlik American base close to the borders with Syria? Can't they see the influx of militants and weapons and training by the NATO power? Have they said anything against it? No. They have enabled this army, which I called it a contract army for the US, in Syria. And this is something that I was inspired by Professor Mikhail Hudson, who said al-Qaeda is a contract army for the US, and they use these al-Qaeda elements in different places around the world because they have their intelligence ties with the leadership of these groups. And it's not a coincidence that al-Qaeda and ISIS, they attack the enemies of the US, and some of the lone wolves attack the Europeans, but this is just, for them, it's a collateral damage. On a greater strategies, in front of greater strategies, 10, let's say, German people die per year, or 2 or 3. It's nothing compared to the profits you make from the conflicts that you created. Now HTS, which is rebranded from the Al-Nusra Fund, they're trying to portray him as the new leader of Syria. And I think this is all, this process of rebranding and legitimizing someone like Julani, it sends the message and signal to the people in the region that if you want to become politically relevant, you have to join such violent, regressive militant groups in the region. So if in the future people in anywhere in the Middle East would like to rise against their government, so what type of example you are setting here? That they have to join al-Qaeda groups and become someone like Abu Mohammed Julani, and then you will rebrand him and present him as a civilized leader to us. But his history will not change for us. We always have to remind ourselves that the ideology that this person believes in, it's takfirism. And now that he is giving all the powers that supported him what they want, gas, energy, geopolitics, etc. But on the ground, we see that his forces are committing ethnic cleansing against the minorities in Homs and Hama, in the Christian Valley, against the Alawites. And they're sending missionaries to the Alawite regions, calling them to become, to join their religion. This is against what the media is goes against what the media is portraying to us, that he has become a diversity friendly. But the footage I receive, it's blood, it's killing, it's decapitation, it's summary executions, and the accusation is ready. He was an Assad regime collaborator. Okay, let's suppose he was an Assad regime collaborator. So where is the court session? Like, who decides this was a collaborator, he harmed someone? What is the punishment for it? And who is the judge? There is no court sessions. I'm just seeing summary executions in the streets. But you're telling me we're building a civilized civil state. But that's not what we are seeing. Now they're discussing even if a woman can become a judge in Syria, because they say a woman is not capable mentally and intellectually to become a judge. And they say that if you have a woman witness for any case, there has to be 2 women eyewitnesses to form 1 man eyewitness. So 2 women is equal to 1 man in their ideology. So is this what the West wants to support in Syria?
This guy and his group, HTS, is a useful tool for the moment. The moment they lose their usefulness, we will see a change. So there's no question, I said it before, this is a group that has a mindset from the Middle Ages.
Yes.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the Syrian population is again the victim in this whole thing. Question is only, where is this going? So at the moment, HTS and al-Julani are useful to the powers to be, and I'm not so sure that the interests between Turkey and the US or even Israel are completely aligned. So we might see fractions here in the not too distant future. This being said, I mean, we can compare this to some extent with Afghanistan. After 20 years, al-Qaeda is back. Again, it's just mind-boggling if you really consider what happens in the region in the last, I don't know, I mean, hundreds of years basically. But going forward now, it's all options are on the table. And in this respect, and I have too little information to be able to comment. All I know is that America builds a massive US embassy in Lebanon with 5,000. I mean, this thing is like, I've seen satellite images. Yeah, it's meant for 5,000 people. Now, why is that? I mean, this is not for Lebanon. This is something way beyond Lebanon. My guess would be it's aimed at Iran and whatever. Yeah, but why this? If you have any information, why this massive so-called US embassy
It's a
in Lebanon.
projection of power. It's a projection of power
And there
on the
must be more.
region.
It must be more than that.
Yes, but
The
remember
utility.
that.
What's the utility?
So the NSA and the CIA are present in this, and they have all the technological means to suck the data in Lebanon. And how did they kill all the leadership of Hezbollah in Lebanon? It's through collecting data. They have been spying on the neighboring countries. They have spied on Syria. They have collected the data and they have assassinated them.
They would not need such a massive megastructure in Lebanon to do that. They
So,
were already able to do that.
so if it doesn't have a military use, what do we expect from them? So intelligence work, diplomatic work, NGOs, what else?
That's exactly my question. I'm
Yeah.
extremely suspicious here.
Yeah, I mean, Armenia, if you go to Armenia, you will see the American embassy is like a military compound, basically. And it is huge, the biggest in the Caucasus. And you always wonder why. But then the result is that you have a government in Armenia, the Pashinyan government, which is shifting the country into the transatlanticism, to NATO. So Lebanon, in this case, I think the decision has been made to localize Hezbollah for the moment, and they have been successful in this as well. And in the next period, I don't know. I don't want to speculate things and say why they're building a 5,000 people big compound there, but it looks like they're protecting themselves from a nuclear attack or something. There is a huge compound there. What do you think about it? Maybe I would like to hear your thoughts about this, because
No, I'm just starting to investigate this. I thought maybe you have more information.
if you want to start, also you have to check the observation points that the British Army has established on the borders between Lebanon and Syria as well. So it seems that it is going in cooperation between the Brits and the Americans in the region. Are they going to reignite a war in Lebanon, a civil war? This has been the case because they tried to, when they bombed the Shia neighborhoods in Lebanon, and they pushed them to go to other regions, and they started bombing these regions, which is overwhelmingly, for example, populated by Christians or Sunnis, in order to tell them the Shias are the problem. If they come to your region, this is what's going to happen. And then fights started between, on a popular level, not on an official level, between them. And the civil war in Lebanon would be the end of Lebanon. The civil war would be the last straw in what is called Lebanon. And then probably this will lead, if Turkey is going to occupy the coast of Syria, this is going to be the case with Lebanon as well. If they start a civil war in Lebanon, we will see Turkish expansion to at least northern Lebanon, because northern Lebanon is in Tripoli, and Tripoli are overwhelmingly Sunnis, and they see the Turkey as just an extension for their former Ottoman glorious era. And that's very problematic because, I'm a survivor of my grandparents are survivors of the Armenian genocide. And when my grandparents arrived to Syria, the people of Syria basically saved my grandparents, and they gave them shelter and refuge. And the grandparents of the people who say we want to go back to our past glory of the Ottoman Empire in the Arabic world, their grandparents also suffered for 400 years under Ottoman occupation. And they have been subjugated the same way that the Armenians and the Christians were. When I speak to someone, a Syrian, who tells me, my grandmother is Armenian. And I'm like, how is your grandmother Armenian? Because they say, I'm from Deir Zor, and when a small child arrived, survived the genocide, we gave her a shelter, and then she didn't have a family, we raised her, and then due to intermarriage, she married my grandfather, right? And they say that their grandparents used to tell them the horrors of the Armenian genocide. So they knew. But then first generation watched the horrors. The second generation remembered the horrors. The third generation forgot about the horrors. And now you have peoples considering Erdogan as the Sultan, as the Emir of the Islamic world.
You would be jailed in Turkey for even discussing the Armenian Holocaust.
Yeah. And I mean, look, if Eastern Anatolia was inhabited by 2 million Armenians, now it's inhabited by almost zero Armenians. If the Ottomans were successful in ethnically cleansing and genociding the Armenians, and now nobody cares and nobody remembers, this also sets a precedent for other genocides. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so people always tell me, Israel cannot recover from this. And I also think, for me, at least, it will not recover from this. But on the long run, people will forget. Just like it happened for the Armenians. Just like 2 years ago in Nagorno-Karabakh, 120,000 Armenians were ethnically cleansed. Who remembers them? No one.
On that note, Kevork, you were very generous with your time. Is there any other topic that we have overlooked? Any thing that you would like to end this conversation with?
I just want to mention one thing. Now we had around 1.5 hours of conversation. I don't come from a position of hatred. My position is always for the best of the people, even if the people do not know what is best for them. I insist on this. And in this case, my only frustration is on the policymakers in the West. So when I speak about these policies which are destructive for us in the region, I'm criticizing policies. I'm not hating against the West. People need to understand that this type of policies have uprooted millions of people from their homes. They have destroyed our past, our present, our future. And we were displaced multiple times. But people see these wars as some sort of, it's another case that we see on TV, and we say, oh my God, those poor people, and let's discuss about it. We talk a little bit and then we do podcast conversation. No, but these places are our roots. This is the birthplace also of Jesus Christ, the Levant. This region has given a lot to humanity. One of the early civilizations started in between the Euphrates and Mesopotamia, and agriculture. So I think people underestimate the importance of the Levant and see us as just a bunch of barbarians, and something like it. That's why I'm motivated to do the work and present content. And I don't come from the position of hate, but I'm trying to tell the people the importance of this region, and what they're doing. It doesn't serve our interest. Although you will always see people like in Cuba or in Iran or in Syria or in Venezuela, or people are frustrated against the government. I understand these things, but it's not the job of a foreign power to come and impose a formula on us. Because when you do that, you're creating more problems for us, because your political formula probably works for you because of the historical and civilizational cycle that you had, which we don't share the same civilization and don't share the same religion. And religion plays an essential role in the Levant. People read, for example, the Quran and then decide how to deal with others, or how to treat a woman, or how marriage works. Their lives are organized by the religion. So when you come and destroy this, let's say, patriarchal system, or trying to destroy centralized government, you're presenting this liberal democracy to us. It will just create more divisions, because then the people, it's not the people themselves established this rule, and they were not ready for it. Then you created a condition for them to start thinking in a sectarian way. So people ask me this question, Kevork, why are you against Islamic State in Syria? If 80% of Syrians are Muslims, why not it's an Islamic State? But who says that the 80% of the Muslims in Syria want an Islamic State to begin with? This is number one. Two, they are completely distorting the meaning and the definition of democracy. If we're going to speak about identity politics, then we could say, yeah, there are different identities and the Muslims are the majority, let them rule. But that's not what democracy is about. Democracy is to one of the aspects of it is to elect officials which represent the interests of the people, and they have political programs and serving everyone equally. My position comes from the care for the people. And I truly see when I criticize the Western government policies that they are harming the people, even if the people do not know what's in their best interest, for example, and they are manipulated or persuaded by these policies. But I have the privilege for the time and the research and the education in this case, and reading a little bit about the past experiences of similar wars. I truly think that what they have done to Syria, it's a crime. It's a big crime against the civilizations in Syria. People do not really know the importance of Syria, and one of the early civilizations that spawned in the region between the Euphrates and Mesopotamia, birthplace of Jesus Christ in the Levant, and agriculture. Many of the people of the region exported many of the findings that they had to the rest of the world, right? So that's why I criticize the Western governments, because their formula for these people in the region is just a recipe for more conflict. It's a recipe for more disintegration. This region has already been divided by Cycus and Pico 100 years ago. So any project that could integrate these communities and these countries again, I'm for it. So I'm for federalism between Syria and Lebanon, Syria and Iraq, Syria and Palestine, Syria and Jordan, or the region itself. But I'm not for federalism that is going to divide what was already divided in the past, right? What is Syria? Syria is the Levant. It's part of the Levant. Palestine is part of Syria. Lebanon is part of Syria, etc. So I see that in the current state of affairs in the region, the people definitely are not going to be the benefactors of this type of policies. And this is where I come from. It's not a position of hating against the West. It's against the policies of the politicians in the West who are themselves harming the interests of their own people in their own countries, basically. So what I'm trying to say, I'm just really want to be critical of it for the best interests of the people, and not for serving the interests of corporations or billionaires or some, sorry to say, psychopaths, because it needs a lot of psychopathy to kill hundreds of thousands and millions of people and act like nothing happened. And somebody like Tony Blair sits with the foreign minister of the HTS, basically, and giving him legitimacy. I think somebody has to give legitimacy to Tony Blair, and in these circumstances, he's coming back under different umbrellas, like, yeah, digital IDs. What could go wrong? Let's roll out a new digital technological infrastructure that could control your lives. But it's for your best interest. But you will own nothing, and you will be happy, and I will own everything, and I will be happy. None of them say I don't own anything and I'm happy, but they tell the people about these things. So I'm on the side of the people.
You will own nothing and you will be happy. On that note, it was my pleasure talking to you, Kevork. Yeah, thanks for having this conversation.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for having me. It was my pleasure.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. It really makes a difference. And as said before, if you want to keep up with my work, make sure you subscribe on Substack. In my Substack newsletters, I dig even deeper. I break down tricky ideas, show you practical analytical techniques, and explain how you can use them in your own life. It's free, the link's right below, and I would love for you to join the conversation. Let me know how it's changing the way you look at the world and its people. As always, thanks for your support, and see you next time.